Lieutenant Vex Thornton stared at the holographic representation of Nexus 6, watching as the swirling purple atmosphere parted to reveal a landscape that looked like someone had combined a jungle, a volcano, and a nightmare, then sprinkled it with bioluminescent death traps. "So let me get this straight," she said, leaning back in her chair and crossing her arms. "You want me to go down to a planet that's claimed the lives of 17 researchers, deliberately attract the attention of something you call the Nexus Reaper, and then what? Hope it doesn't live up to its name." Dr. Muldoon, a Zentaurian, with 8 eyes that blinked in unsynchronized patterns, nodded all 4 of his heads. "Precisely, Lieutenant. Your species is remarkably durable. We've reviewed the data, and humans can survive nearly 40% longer than other sentient species when being actively hunted." "Wow, that's so comforting," Vex deadpanned. "Remind me why I volunteered for this." Commander Quip, the only other human on the research vessel, cleared his throat. "You didn't. Your file says you're the best bait specialist in the Galactic Union's Xenobiological Research Division." "Bait specialist," Vex repeated, rubbing her temples. "That's what they're calling it now. Last time I checked, my job title was Adaptive Environment Infiltration Expert, which is already a fancy way of saying we send her into dangerous places and see what happens." Dr. Frell, an insectoid researcher with translucent wings that hummed with anxiety, chittered excitedly. "Your survival statistics are extraordinary. 17 missions with a 94% success rate. What happened to the other 6%? Asked Commander Quip. "That's when I got eaten by a swamp slug on Deneb 7, Vex replied. "Fortunately, it had terrible digestion. Spent 6 hours in a stomach before being regurgitated. Smelled like fermented gym socks for a month." The research team fell silent, all 14 of their collective eyes blinking simultaneously for once. "Nobody told us about that incident," Dr. Muldoon said finally. "Yeah, well, it wasn't a failure in my book. I got the data, didn't I? Plus I learned what the inside of a swamp slug looks like. Spoiler alert, it's mostly acid and the remains of poor decisions." Dr. Muldoon moved to the hologram controls, zooming in on a region of the planet marked in angry red. "The Nexus Reaper has been detected primarily in this quadrant. It appears to be territorial, highly intelligent, and possesses remarkable hunting capabilities. Can we see what it looks like?" Vex asked. "That's part of the problem," Commander Quip interjected. "No one has seen it and transmitted images back. We have heat signatures, some partial tracks, and," he paused dramatically, "the remains." "Remains? You mean the previous researchers, what was left of them?" Dr. Frell chittered, mandibles clicking with what Vex could only interpret as inappropriate excitement. "Fascinatingly efficient predatory behavior. No wasted energy, no trophy taking. Pure survival instinct." "Charming," Vex muttered. "And the goal here is what exactly? Besides seeing how long I can avoid becoming fascinatingly efficient prey." Dr. Muldoon's primary head looked solemn while his secondary heads continued analyzing data. "The Nexus Reaper produces a biochemical compound that we believe could revolutionize regenerative medicine. Its tissue can apparently heal almost instantly, if we could study it." "Let me guess," Vex interrupted. "That's what the last 17 researchers were trying to do before they became remains." A guilty silence confirmed her suspicion. "We've improved the protocols," Commander Quip offered. "Better equipment, better tracking, better extraction plan. Better bait," Vex added, with a wry smile. "That's where I come in, right? Your particular biochemistry should be especially attractive to the Reaper," Dr. Frell confirmed, completely missing the sarcasm. "Human pheromones mixed with the synthetic compound we've developed should create an irresistible lure. So I'll smell delicious." "Perfect." Vex stood up, stretching her arms above her head. "When do I drop?" 12 hours, Commander Quip answered. "We'll brief you on equipment and extraction protocols in 4 hours. Until then I suggest you rest." "Rest?" Vex echoed, shooting him a look. "Because nothing says sweet dreams like knowing I'm about to become the galaxy's most expensive appetizer." As the research team filed out, Dr. Muldoon paused at the door. "Lieutenant Thornton, there is something else you should know. Please tell me the Reaper is actually a misunderstood vegetarian." "Not quite. The last researcher to encounter it and partially survive." "Partially survive? What does that even mean?" "He lost several limbs but managed to transmit a message before expiring. He claimed the creature was studying him, not just hunting. It seemed curious. Vex felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature control. Great, so it plays with its food. Even better. We believe it may be more than simple predatory behavior. This creature could be intelligent. And yet you're still sending me down there with eau de snack perfume. Your concern is touching, Doctor. As the door slid shut behind Dr. Muldoon, Vex turned back to the hologram of Nexus 6. The planet rotated slowly, its bizarre geography coming into view: razor-sharp mountain ranges, acid lakes, and dense jungles, where everything probably wanted to kill you. Bait specialist, she muttered to herself. Maybe I should have been a librarian. This is your environmental suit, explained Tech Officer Plex. A gelatinous blob of translucent orange who communicated through a series of light pulses translated by a device attached to what Vex assumed was their torso. It's been designed specifically for human physiology and Nexus 6 conditions. Vex eyed the sleek black material with suspicion. Looks thin. Will it stop? I don't know. Getting my organs rearranged by something called the Reaper. Plex pulsed a pattern that the translator rendered as a chortle. Oh my. No, nothing could stop that. This is merely to protect you from the atmospheric toxins and minor predators. Minor predators, Vex repeated. As opposed to the major one I'm actively trying to attract. Got it. She slipped into the suit, which adhered to her body like a second skin. It was surprisingly comfortable, adjusting to her movements with fluid ease. The blue button activates camouflage mode. Plex continued, pointing to a control panel on her wrist. The red one is your emergency beacon. The yellow one administers pain suppressants. I'm betting I'll be hitting that yellow one a lot, Vex muttered. And this, Plex wobbled excitedly, producing a small vial of iridescent purple liquid, is the attractant compound. Vex took the vial gingerly. So I just splash this on like cheap cologne. Precisely. Apply it to pulse points for maximum dispersal. Pulse points. Vex nodded sagely. Because I want the apex predator to go straight for my jugular. Smart thinking. Commander Quip entered the prep room, eyebrows furrowed at the datapad in his hands. Final briefing, Lieutenant. Your drop pod will land 3 kilometers from the last known location of the Reaper. You'll proceed on foot from there, collecting environmental samples as cover for your primary mission, which is being delicious. Quip ignored her. The compound should draw the Reaper to your location within 6 hours. Once we confirm visual contact, we'll deploy the containment team. And if the Reaper decides I'm more than just an interesting smell, you have this. Quip handed her what looked like a cattle prod designed by someone with a flair for the dramatic. It had unnecessary glowing parts and far too many chrome accents. A stick, Vex said flatly. To fight the thing that's killed 17 people. It's a neural disruptor. Theoretically, it should confuse the Reaper's synaptic pathways long enough for you to escape. Theoretically, Vex repeated. Has anyone actually tested this theory? You will be. Plex pulsed cheerfully. Fantastic. Vex holstered the disruptor. Any other last-minute tips? Maybe a good recipe for how I like to be prepared as a main course. Quip's face softened momentarily. Look, Thornton. I know this is asking a lot. It's asking me to be Monster Chow. But the compound this creature produces could save billions of lives. Just get us a tissue sample and get out. That's all we need. Vex sighed dramatically. Fine. But when I get back I want a vacation. A real one. On a planet where nothing is trying to eat me. Deal. Quip nodded, then gestured toward the launch bay. Your pod is ready. 20 minutes later, Vex was strapped into a drop pod that looked suspiciously like something the maintenance crew had cobbled together from spare parts. The comms crackled to life. Launch sequence initiated, came Dr. Muldoon's voice. Impact in 3 minutes 42 seconds. Impact, Vex grumbled. Love the word choice there, Lieutenant. Dr. Frell's voice chittered through the speaker. Remember to activate the attractant immediately upon landing. The compound begins degrading after exposure to Nexus 6's atmosphere. Heaven forbid I don't smell tasty enough, Vex replied, then added under her breath. Pretty sure my fierce sweat will attract plenty of attention anyway. The pod began to shake as it entered Nexus 6's atmosphere. Through the small viewport, Vex watched as the swirling purple clouds gave way to a landscape that somehow looked even more threatening in person than it had in the hologram. 30 seconds to impact, announced the pod's AI in a voice that was far too cheerful for the circumstances. Hey, Vex called up to the ship. Quick question before I potentially die. Why didn't you just drop a drone with this attractant stuff? Why does it have to be a person? There was an awkward pause before Dr. Muldoon responded. We tried that 6 times. The Reaper ignored them all. It seems to prefer living bait, added Dr. Frel, failing to keep the scientific excitement out of his voice. Oh well, that's just Vex's sarcastic reply was cut short as the pod slammed into the surface of Nexus 6 with enough force to rattle her teeth. When the ringing in her ears subsided, she realized the pod door had automatically opened. A gust of alien air rushed in, filtered through her suit's systems to become breathable. Outside, a riot of colors assaulted her eyes, plants in impossible shades of blue and magenta, a sky that couldn't decide if it wanted to be purple or green, and rock formations that seemed to defy gravity. Pod has landed successfully, the ship's voice announced in her ear. Vital signs stable. Atmospheric conditions within acceptable parameters. Define acceptable, Vex muttered, unstrapping herself. Only 62% toxic to human biology, replied the AI, missing her sarcasm entirely. Vex stepped out of the pod, her boots sinking slightly into the spongy ground. The landscape around her pulsed with life, vegetation that moved without wind, distant calls of creatures she couldn't identify, and an omnipresent humming that seemed to come from the planet itself. With a resigned sigh, she uncapped the vial of attractant, and dabbed it on her wrists, neck, and behind her ears, just like her favorite perfume back home. The liquid tingled against her skin even through the suit material. Attractant deployed, she reported. Now commencing the wait-to-be-hunted portion of our program. Excellent, Dr. Frel responded. Remember, we need you to stay alive long enough to collect a tissue sample. Your concern for my well-being is overwhelming, Vex replied, scanning the alien terrain before her. I'm heading northeast toward the target zone. Try not to lose my signal, okay? I'd hate for my last words to be unappreciated. As she began to walk, the full reality of her situation settled in. She was alone on a deadly planet, deliberately making herself attractive to a creature known only for its efficiency in killing. The nervous laugh that escaped her lips sounded eerily loud in the alien landscape. Just another day at the office, she told herself. Just another day at the extremely dangerous, possibly fatal office. 2 hours into her trek through the alien wilderness, Vex was starting to think the infamous Nexus Reaper might be on vacation. She'd collected soil samples, cataloged several plant species that tried to catalog her right back, and nearly fallen into what appeared to be a carnivorous puddle. But no sign of the apex predator she was supposed to be luring. Status update. Commander Quip's voice crackled through her comms. Still alive, shockingly, Vex replied, stepping carefully over a vine that seemed to be tracking her movements. Either your attractant doesn't work, or the Reaper's not interested in the daily special. Our sensors indicate multiple life forms in your vicinity. Dr. Frel chittered excitedly. Something large is definitely tracking you. Vex froze, her hand instinctively moving to the neural disruptor. And you're just mentioning this now. We didn't want to alarm you, Dr. Muldoon's voice replied calmly. Continue as planned. The creature appears to be studying your movements. Oh great, it's contemplating how best to fill at me. A sound like branches breaking came from somewhere to her left. Vex turned slowly, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure whatever was out there could hear it. The foliage parted, and Vex found herself face to face with absolutely nothing. Huh, she said, relaxing slightly. False alarm. That's when she felt the breath on the back of her neck. Hot, humid air that smelled vaguely of cinnamon and ozone. The hairs on her arms stood up, and not just from fear. Very slowly, Vex turned around. Holy mother of, she whispered. The Nexus Reaper towered over her, easily 3 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body was a rippling mass of midnight blue scales and corded muscle. 6 limbs, 4 powerful legs and 2 smaller, more dexterous appendages, supported a frame that seemed both solid and oddly fluid, as if its very structure could reshape at will. But it was the head that truly made Vex's breath catch. No eyes, at least, not in any traditional sense. Instead, a crown of sensory appendages, fanned out like a halo of writhing tentacles, each tipped with what looked like a delicate crystalline structure. A mouth full of teeth that didn't seem designed for tearing flesh, but rather, sampling it. I see it, she whispered into her comms, trying to keep her voice steady. And it definitely sees me. Excellent. Dr. Frel's voice was practically vibrating with excitement. Is it displaying aggressive behavior? The Reaper tilted its eyeless head, the sensory crown adjusting like an antenna seeking better reception. It made no move to attack. Not exactly, Vex said, barely moving her lips. It's just watching me. Perfect, Dr. Muldoon replied. The containment team is preparing to deploy. Keep it distracted. With what? My winning personality, Vex hissed. The Reaper suddenly moved, so fast that Vex didn't have time to reach for her weapon. One of its dexterous appendages shot forward, and stopped, hovering just inches from her face. At the end of the limb was something like a hand, with too many joints and oddly placed digits. It was holding a flower. Guys, Vex said, blinking in confusion. I think it's giving me a gift. Impossible, Dr. Frel chittered. The Reaper is pure predatory instinct. It must be trying to lure you closer. The creature made a sound then, somewhere between a purr and a hum, the vibration so deep that Vex felt it in her chest. It pushed the flower closer to her. I don't think so, Vex said slowly. I think it's curious. Against all better judgment and basic survival instincts, Vex raised her hand and gently took the flower. The Reaper's sensory crown rippled in what almost seemed like pleasure. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Muldoon. It may be attempting communication. Lieutenant, back away slowly, Commander Quip ordered. The containment team will be there in 5 minutes. But before Vex could move, the ground beneath her feet began to tremble. The Reaper went rigid, its sensory crown flaring wide. A crack appeared in the earth, and from it emerged what looked like a cross between a centipede and a chainsaw, its segments bristling with natural blades. It lunged toward Vex with frightening speed. The Reaper moved faster. It placed itself between Vex and the new threat, its body expanding to shield her completely. With a sound like tearing metal, it brought one massive limb down on the centipede thing, crushing it instantly. What's happening? Quip demanded through the comms. Vex watched in astonishment as the Reaper turned back to her, its sensory crown now rippling in what she could only interpret as concern. It made that purring sound again, softer this time. It protected me, she said, bewildered. That thing was going to attack me, and the Reaper killed it. Impossible, Dr. Frel insisted. The Reaper is territorial. It was simply eliminating competition for its prey, which is you. The Reaper reached out again, this time gently touching Vex's shoulder, as if checking her for injuries. The touch was surprisingly gentle for something that had just pulverized another creature. I don't think I'm the prey here, Vex said slowly, a smile spreading across her face as realization dawned. I think I just made a friend. Lieutenant, this is absurd, Commander Quip spluttered. That creature has killed 17 researchers. The Reaper's sensory crown suddenly stiffened, oriented toward the sky. It made a new sound, something like a warning growl. I think it knows you're coming, Vex said, looking up to where she knew the containment shuttle would soon appear. And I don't think it likes that idea. The compound must be affecting its cognitive functions, Dr. Muldoon theorized. This is unprecedented behavior. The Reaper nudged Vex gently, then took several steps away, looking back as if expecting her to follow. I think it wants me to go with it, she said. Absolutely not. 3 voices shouted in her ear simultaneously. The Reaper made the purring sound again, more insistent this time. It picked up another flower, and offered it to her, then pointed with its dexterous limb toward a ridge in the distance. Vex looked from the creature to the sky, where she could now hear the faint sound of the approaching shuttle. Sorry guys, she said, reaching up to her earpiece. I think I'm going to follow the terrifying but apparently friendly apex predator instead of sticking around for your sketchy containment plan. Lieutenant Thornton, this is a direct order. Vex removed her comm device, and dropped it on the ground. The Reaper watched this action with obvious interest, its sensory crown rippling. Well, she said to the creature, taking a step toward it. Lead the way, big guy. Just promise not to eat me, okay? The Reaper made what sounded suspiciously like a chuckle and turned, moving with surprising grace for its size, occasionally looking back to make sure she was following. And just like that, Lieutenant Vex Thornton, bait specialist extraordinaire, found herself trailing after the deadliest predator on Nexus 6 like it was a tour guide in a particularly deadly national park. So what exactly am I supposed to call you? Vex asked, carefully picking her way over a fallen log that was slowly dissolving into the forest floor. I can't just keep thinking of you as Reaper. Feels a bit morbid. The creature, padding silently beside her, tilted its sensory crown in what Vex had started to recognize as curiosity. How about Rex? No, too cliché. Fluffy? Definitely not. Blue? Too obvious. She studied the rippling midnight scales that occasionally caught the alien sunlight. Midnight. That could work. The creature made a low rumbling sound that vibrated through the air. Not a fan? Okay. How about Pax? Short, dignified, means pieces in Latin, which is ironic considering you're supposedly the most dangerous thing on this planet. The rumbling changed pitch, becoming almost musical. Pax it is, Vex declared. Nice to formally meet you. They had been traveling for nearly 2 hours, moving steadily toward a range of crystalline mountains that glittered on the horizon. Twice more Pax had positioned itself between Vex and potential threats, once from something that looked like sentient quicksand, and once from what appeared to be toxic spores released by a flowering plant. Each time the creature had dispatched the danger with terrifying efficiency before turning back to Vex with that strange gentle concern. You know? Vex said conversationally. Back on the ship they think you've killed 17 researchers. That true? Pax made no sound, but its pace slowed slightly. Not judging if it is. Researchers can be pretty annoying. Always poking and prodding where they shouldn't. The creature stopped completely, its sensory crown fully extended. It reached out one of its dexterous limbs and traced a pattern in the dirt. Vex bent down to look. Are you drawing something? She asked, genuinely surprised. The pattern was crude but unmistakable. A bipedal figure holding something pointed at a shape that could only be Pax. They attacked you first, Vex said slowly. They weren't researchers at all, were they? They were hunters. Pax made the purring sound again. Stronger this time. Well, that explains a lot. Vex straightened up. They told me you produce some kind of biochemical compound that regenerates tissue. They wanted to study you, but... She looked at the drawing again. Study probably meant dissect, didn't it? The creature's sensory crown rippled in what Vex was beginning to recognize as agitation. Don't worry, big guy. I'm not here to cut you up. She patted her pockets. In fact, I don't even have a tissue sample kit. Seems our friends on the ship weren't entirely honest with me either. A distant humming sound caught her attention. Looking up, she spotted a small drone hovering at the edge of the clearing. Its camera lens focused on them. We've got company, she muttered. Pax didn't move to attack the drone. Instead, it positioned itself slightly in front of Vex, its posture alert but not aggressive. Lieutenant Thornton, Commander Quip's voice emanated from the drone. You are in direct violation of mission protocols. Return to the designated extraction point immediately. Yeah? About that, Vex called back. Turns out your research mission is actually a hunting expedition. Care to explain why you didn't mention that part? There was a pause before Dr. Muldoon's voice responded. The Reaper's biochemical properties could save countless lives. The needs of the many outweigh. Oh, spare me the utilitarian ethics lecture, Vex interrupted. You lied to me. You were never going to contain and study it. You were going to kill it. Another pause. Then? The creature is too dangerous to capture alive. Yes? Tissue extraction would be terminal for the specimen. But the scientific benefits. The scientific benefits. Vex mimicked sarcastically. You know what? I think Pax here might have some objections to your cost-benefit analysis. Pax? Dr. Frell's voice chittered. You named it? He named himself. Actually, Vex replied, looking at the creature beside her. And he's a lot smarter than you gave him credit for. The drone moved closer. Lieutenant, you appear to be suffering from Stockholm Syndrome, or possibly an effect of the planet's atmosphere. That creature is manipulating you. That creature, Vex said pointedly, has saved my life 3 times in the last 2 hours. Which is 3 times more than you lot have managed in our entire working relationship. As if to prove her point, Pax gently nudged her shoulder, then extended one of his dexterous limbs toward a patch of vegetation she had been about to step on. The plant had needle-like protrusions that were almost invisible against the forest floor. Make that 4 times, she amended. Thanks, Pax. The drone hovered silently for a moment before Commander Quip's voice returned, now noticeably cooler. We're sending a retrieval team to your location. Both you and the specimen will be returned to the ship. I wouldn't advise that, Vex warned. Pax doesn't seem to like uninvited guests. Those 17 researchers found that out the hard way. The specimen will be contained, Dr. Muldoon stated firmly, and you will face disciplinary action for your insubordination. The drone retreated, disappearing back into the forest canopy. Vex sighed. Well, that could have gone better. She looked at Pax, who was still watching the spot where the drone had vanished. They're not going to give up, you know. You're too valuable to them. Pax turned to her, its sensory crown undulating in what appeared to be consideration. Then, decisively, it nudged her again and continued walking toward the mountains. You have a plan, don't you? Vex asked, hurrying to keep up. Some kind of home field advantage up there. The creature made that rumbling musical sound again. I'll take that as a yes, Vex said, grinning despite the circumstances. Lead on then. Let's show these researchers why you don't mess with the planet's deadliest predator, and his surprisingly adequate human sidekick. As they walked, Vex noticed something strange. Pax was deliberately moving in a pattern that doubled back on itself, crossing their own trail multiple times, wading through streams and occasionally brushing against certain plants that released a pungent odor. "You're masking our scent," she realized, "throwing them off our trail." Pax's sensory crown rippled in what she could only interpret as approval. "You know," Vex said thoughtfully, "for something that's supposed to be pure predatory instinct, you sure do have a lot of tactical awareness." The creature paused, then deliberately reached out to touch Vex's temple with a surprisingly gentle appendage. A strange tingling sensation spread through her mind, and for a brief moment she had the distinct impression of connection. Not words exactly, but concepts. Intelligence, recognition, kinship. "Whoa," she breathed as Pax withdrew the appendage. Was that telepathy?" Pax made the purring sound again, this time accompanied by a movement that looked remarkably like a shrug. "Limited telepathy," Vex guessed. "You can't really talk to me, but you can share impressions, feelings?" Another purring sound, more affirmative this time. "That's how you knew I wasn't a threat," Vex said slowly. "You could sense my intentions." She frowned. "But why follow me? Why not just ignore me like you did those drones?" Pax's sensory crown extended fully, and the creature once again touched her temple. This time the impression was clearer. Curiosity. Difference. Respect. "You were curious about me," Vex translated, smiling. "Because I'm different from the others who came here. I wasn't trying to hunt you." The purring grew louder. "Well," Vex said, feeling oddly touched, "I have to say this is the weirdest friendship I've ever formed, but I'll take it." She looked toward the mountains, now much closer. "Now, let's figure out how to deal with our mutual problem before the retrieval team arrives." The crystalline mountains loomed above them, jutting from the landscape like massive shards of colored glass. As they reached the base, Vex realized why Pax had led her here. The crystal formations created natural distortion fields that would scramble any tracking technology the research team might be using. "Smart move," she told her alien companion. "They'll have a hard time finding us in this geological mess." Pax made a satisfied rumbling sound, then gestured toward a narrow crevice in the crystal wall. Inside was a cave system illuminated by bioluminescent fungi that cast an ethereal blue glow over everything. "Your home?" Vex asked, following Pax inside. The creature dipped its sensory crown in what she'd come to recognize as affirmation. The cave opened into a larger chamber that took Vex's breath away. Crystal formations reflected and amplified the bioluminescent light, creating a space that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale rather than on a deadly alien planet. In one corner, a collection of objects was carefully arranged. Pieces of equipment from previous expeditions, colorful rocks, unusual plant specimens, and even what appeared to be toys crafted from native materials. "You've been collecting things," Vex said, amazed. "Studying us as much as we've been trying to study you." Pax moved to the collection and delicately selected an object, a standard-issue datapad from the Galactic Union. It was cracked but still functional. The creature offered it to Vex. "You want me to look at this?" She took the pad, wiping dust from its screen. As she activated it, her eyes widened. "These are research logs from the previous expeditions." She scrolled through the entries, her expression darkening with each passage. "Specimen extraction protocols finalized," she read aloud. "Dr. Krax confirms complete harvesting will maximize yield of the regenerative compound." Complete harvesting? They were planning to. Pax made a low sad sound. "They wanted to strip you for parts," Vex finished, disgust evident in her voice. "And they've been trying for years." She looked up at the creature. "Dr. Krax. I haven't met anyone with that name on the ship." Pax's sensory crown flattened against its body, a gesture Vex hadn't seen before. The creature touched her temple again, and this time the impression was unmistakable. Danger, deception, hidden. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. Krax is in charge of the whole operation, isn't he? And he's been hiding his involvement. She scrolled further through the logs. "These go back 5 years, way longer than they told me. They've been studying Nexus 6. A sudden rumbling vibration shook dust from the cave ceiling. Pax went rigid, sensory crown fully extended. "They found us, didn't they?" Vex said, already knowing the answer. Outside the cave, powerful lights cut through the dim Nexus 6 twilight. The whine of engines grew louder, and Vex could make out the silhouette of a much larger shuttle than the retrieval craft she'd been expecting. This was a hunting vessel, bristling with weaponry. "Lieutenant Thornton," a new voice boomed through external speakers. "This is Chief Science Officer Krax. You have something that belongs to me." Vex peered cautiously from the cave entrance. Standing on the shuttle's extended platform was a tall, slender alien with pale green skin and 4 arms. Unlike the other researchers, Dr. Krax had a distinctly predatory look, not in physical appearance, but in the cold calculation of his eyes. "I wasn't aware any living being belonged to you, Doctor," Vex called back, staying partially concealed behind a crystal formation. "Don't be obtuse, Lieutenant. The specimen you've been cavorting with is the culmination of 5 years of research. Its biochemical properties represent a scientific breakthrough worth billions." "Funny how nobody mentioned you during my mission briefing," Vex replied. "Or the fact that your research involves killing Pax and harvesting his body parts." Krax's expression didn't change, but his posture stiffened. "Commander Quip and the others are merely field researchers. I direct the broader scientific agenda from our main facility. As for the specimen's termination, a regrettable necessity for scientific progress." "He's not a specimen," Vex said firmly. "He's intelligent, possibly even sentient. Your own logs prove you've known this all along." "Anthropomorphizing an alien predator doesn't change the facts," Krax replied smoothly. "Now I'm offering you one chance to complete your mission properly. Deliver the creature, and I'll ensure you receive full credit and compensation for its capture." Pax moved silently beside Vex, his massive frame somehow managing to stay hidden behind the crystal formations. He touched her shoulder gently, and she felt a wave of resolve flow through their connection. "And if I refuse?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "Then you will be considered contaminated by prolonged exposure to the planet's environment," Krax said, his tone clinical. "A tragic casualty of xenobiological research." From the shuttle emerged the familiar figures of Dr. Muldoon, Dr. Frel, and Commander Quip, along with 6 armed security personnel. Quip at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "You knew about this," Vex called to them. "All of you." "The greater good, Lieutenant," Dr. Muldoon replied, all 4 of his heads avoiding eye contact. "The compound could save millions." "There are always alternatives to murder," Vex shot back. "Did you even try to communicate with him? To establish a non-lethal method of study?" Dr. Frel's mandibles clicked nervously. "The Reaper is simply too valuable, and too dangerous to approach peacefully." "Really?" Vex stepped fully into view, arms spread wide. "Because I've been hanging out with him for hours, and somehow I'm still alive." "Curious that." "Enough talk," Krax snapped, signaling to the security team. "Secure the specimen. Use non-lethal methods if possible, but the priority is capture." The armed personnel began to spread out, weapons raised. Vex backed toward the cave entrance, her hand on the neural disruptor she'd almost forgotten about. "Last chance, Lieutenant," Krax called. "Stand aside, or be considered an obstacle to scientific progress." Vex looked at the armed team advancing on her position, then back at Pax, who was watching her with his sensory crown fully extended. "Sorry, Doc," she called back, drawing the disruptor. "But I've got a strict policy against helping sociopaths dissect my friends." As the security team rushed forward, Pax emerged from hiding with a speed that belied his size. Before the first guard could fire, the creature had disarmed him with one sweeping motion of a dexterous limb. The second guard found himself lifted bodily and tossed, not violently enough to kill, Vex noted, but certainly enough to take him out of the fight. Krax was shouting orders, his clinical demeanor cracking into rage. "Lethal force authorized. Kill them both." "So much for scientific specimens," Vex muttered, diving behind a crystal formation as energy blasts shattered the ground where she'd been standing. The battle had begun, and as Vex watched Pax move with lethal grace against their attackers, she couldn't help but think that the researchers had severely underestimated just how deadly the planet's apex predator could be when it had something to protect. Energy blasts shattered crystal formations around them, sending razor-sharp shards flying in all directions. Vex ducked behind a boulder, neural disruptor clutched tightly in her sweating palm. "This isn't exactly how I plan to spend my day," she muttered, risking a quick glance at the battlefield. Pax moved like liquid shadow among the security team, disabling their weapons with surgical precision. 2 guards already lay unconscious, while 3 more fired wildly at the creature's blur of motion. Commander Quip had taken cover behind the shuttle, looking conflicted. Dr. Frel and Dr. Muldoon cowered near the vessel's entrance. Only Krax stood his ground, a sinister-looking weapon in each of his 4 hands. "You can't protect it forever, Lieutenant," Krax called out. "That creature's biochemical properties will be harvested, with or without your cooperation." "You know what your problem is, Doc," Vex shouted back. "You're so busy thinking about what you can take from Pax, that you never considered what he might offer willingly." That gave Krax pause. "What nonsense are you spouting?" Vex caught Pax's attention and tapped her temple meaningfully. The creature understood immediately, disengaging from the fight and gliding to her side. Pax is intelligent, Vex announced, standing up with the creature beside her. He communicates. He reasons. He creates. And yes, he has remarkable regenerative abilities. But did it ever occur to you to just ask for his help? Krax lowered his weapon slightly, eyes narrowing. You expect me to believe that beast would voluntarily provide samples? Maybe if you hadn't started by trying to dissect him. Yeah, Vex retorted. She turned to Pax and asked softly, would you? If they promised not to hurt you, would you help them? Pax's sensory crown extended fully. One dexterous limb reached up and with a movement almost too fast to follow, extracted a small piece of tissue from its own body. The wound sealed instantly, not even leaving a scar. Pax held the sample out, not toward Krax, but toward Vex. There's your miracle compound, Vex said, taking the offering carefully. Freely given, not taken by force. Krax's face contorted with frustration. This changes nothing. One small sample isn't enough. We need the entire biological system to study. Actually, Dr. Muldoon spoke up unexpectedly, all four heads now focused on the scene. A willingly given sample would be far more valuable. It suggests the possibility of cultivation rather than extraction. Sustainable research, Dr. Frell added, mandibles clicking excitedly. A cooperative subject could provide regenerating samples indefinitely. Krax's eyes darted between his colleagues and Pax, calculations clearly running behind them. The Galactic Union's Bioethics Committee would never approve vivisection of a proven sentient species, he muttered, almost to himself. And you've just had several witnesses confirm sentience, Vex pointed out. So maybe we can all put our weapons down and talk like civilized beings. A tense silence fell. The remaining security personnel looked to Krax for orders. Commander Quip emerged cautiously from behind the shuttle. She's right, he said. This isn't what I signed up for, Krax. We're researchers, not hunters. For a moment, Vex thought Krax might order the attack to continue. Then, with visible reluctance, he lowered his weapons. Very well, he said coldly. We'll bring this matter before the Scientific Council. Great, Vex replied, not lowering her disruptor. And I'll be presenting evidence from that datapad over there, detailing 5 years of your unauthorized lethal research methods. Krax's expression darkened. You wouldn't dare try me, Vex shot back. I'm having a pretty bad day, what with being used as bait and then nearly executed. Pax made a rumbling sound that somehow managed to convey amusement. Commander Quip stepped forward. The lieutenant is right. This has gone too far. He turned to Vex. I swear I didn't know the full extent of Krax's plans. None of us did. Convenient, Vex replied dryly. What do you propose? Dr. Muldoon asked, addressing both Vex and Pax. Vex looked at her alien companion. What do you think? Feel like taking a trip off-world to explain your side of the story? Or would you rather these folks packed up and never came back? Pax considered for a moment, sensory crown undulating thoughtfully. Then, decisively, the creature touched Vex's temple. The impression was clear, traveling together. Well, Vex said, grinning. Looks like you're getting your cooperative subject after all. Just not in the way you planned. This is preposterous, Krax sputtered. That creature belongs in a secure research facility, not wandering freely through Galactic Union space. Actually, Commander Quip interrupted. As a newly recognized sentient species, the Nexus Reaper, or rather Pax, has certain rights under Union law, including the right to an advocate. He nodded toward Vex. I think he's already chosen his. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Vex Thornton stood before the Galactic Union's Scientific Council, Pax towering beside her. The council chamber fell silent as the enormous creature delicately placed tissue samples into a specialized container. As you can see, Vex explained to the stunned council members, Pax is willing to provide regenerative samples for study. In return, he asks for recognition of his species' rights and protection of Nexus 6 as a sovereign habitat. And what of Dr. Krax? Asked the council chairperson, a wizened Andorian, with silvery skin. Currently enjoying the hospitality of the Union's Ethics Commission, Vex replied, with no small satisfaction, along with all his research data on illegal vivisection techniques. The chairperson nodded. And your role in all this, Lieutenant Thornton? Vex glanced at Pax, who made the purring sound she'd grown fond of. I've been appointed as xenobiological cultural liaison to the Nexus species, she said. Turns out I have a knack for communicating with creatures everyone else finds terrifying. Indeed, the chairperson said, eyeing Pax with a mixture of fear and fascination. And this is the same predator that reportedly killed 17 researchers. 17 would-be hunters. Vex corrected. Who shot first? Besides, Pax has agreed to a full memory scan to verify his side of events. Pax's sensory crown rippled in what Vex now recognized as pride. As the council debated the unprecedented situation, Vex leaned against her unlikely friend. Not bad for a bait specialist, huh? Pax rumbled affectionately. You know, she continued quietly, they're never going to believe this back at headquarters. Lieutenant Thornton returns from suicide mission with Galaxy's deadliest predator as a pet. Pax made an indignant sound. Sorry, Vex corrected, laughing. Not pet, partner. Better? The creature's sensory crown brushed against her shoulder in approval. Later, as they boarded the diplomatic vessel that would take them to the Union's central research facility, Commander Quip approached them. I owe you an apology, Lieutenant, he said. We all do. Save it, Vex replied, not unkindly. Just make sure nobody else gets used as monster bait, without full disclosure. Quip nodded, then hesitantly extended a hand toward Pax. And no hard feelings. Pax regarded the commander's outstretched hand for a long moment, then extended one massive limb and very gently shook it. He says you're forgiven, Vex translated. But he'll be watching to make sure you keep your word about protecting Nexus 6. As the ship departed, Vex looked out the viewport at the purple-hazed planet receding below them. You know, she said to Pax, when they told me I was going to be bait for the deadliest predator on the planet, this is definitely not how I expected things to turn out. Pax made his musical rumbling sound. Yeah, Vex agreed, smiling. I like this ending better too. And as the stars streaked past, Lieutenant Vex Thornton, former bait specialist, current xenobiological cultural liaison, settled in for what promised to be a very interesting journey with the galaxy's most misunderstood apex predator at her side.